All right, so this week we're going to talk about our parasitic ticks, lice, and mosquitoes. So we're going to want to record the name of the species as well as key characteristics and our disease concerns that we have with these different invertebrates. Right, and then we've got our ID resources. We have some great information from Merck Veterinary Manual as well as the CDC information on ticks. So that is going to be some of the great information and resources you can take a look at. So here is our Quizlet. First thing we're going to talk about is what an actual parasite is, right? So we should be familiar with this at that point, but a parasite is an organism that lives on or in a host and causes it harm. Right, so parasites cause harm. That's the important key piece there. It's causing harm to its host. Now, the host is the animal or plant on which or in which another organism lives, right? So I can live on something or in something. So again, a host, you think of it as you're hosting that other organism on your body. Then I've got vector. Vector is definitely important to note. We can get far more advanced into parasitology. It's definitely an interesting career field. But we want to talk about a vector. Vectors are carriers of disease. They're not affected by the disease, but they're able to transmit it to other species. So an example would be a mosquito for malaria, right? So a mosquito would be a vector for that disease. First, we're going to talk about our lice. Lice, we want to talk about their life cycle. They go from egg to nymph to adult, and that life cycle all happens on one host, so the same host for our lice. This would be an incomplete metamorphosis because it's only going from an egg to a nymph to an adult. So this life cycle again occurs on its one host, so that whole thing can happen on one animal. We have two categories of lice. We have the biting louse, which is the order Melophaga. So we've got the biting lice. Their head is wider than their thorax. So their thorax is a little bitty thing right there that its legs are attached to. And we can see that its head is much larger. So we want to think about that as the head needs to be large because it is going to take the bite. Right? So it is going to be biting, right? So we can think about it that way. So your head is wider than your thorax. So this is in the genus Trichodectes. So Trichodectes, we have, this is going to be a louse that we generally find on a dog, right? Trichodectes canis. So again, I can see that nice large head, that little itty bitty thorax right now, and a giant abdomen. And next, we're going to look at the genus Bovacola. So we have Bovacolas right here. There's some slight differences with the antennae, right? Again, we still have that head is wider than the actual thorax. And this is an insect, right? We only have 1, 2, 3 legs on each side. Next, we have our sucking louse. So these are the order Anophlura is what we're going to be looking at. So what do we notice is different with these? Their head is thinner than their thorax. So if you want to think about a sucking louse, it's going to get in there. It needs to be able to suck on their host. And so we can think about that as their head needing to be tinier to be able to get there. So that might be a way that you can remember those. So again, your sucking louse or order Anophlura, your head is thinner than your thorax. So here we have the genus Haematopenus or Pinus. So here we have those tiny little head. Okay, the thorax is right there with its little legs attached to it. Okay, and then you have that flat abdomen. Then we have Linonathus. So Linonathus, again, super small head right there, and then your thorax and your bulbous abdomen. So again, these are the sucking louse. Next, we're going to talk about our ticks. So our tick life cycle, we go from an egg to a nymph to an adult, and it's important to note that the life cycle occurs in multiple hosts, right? So this is when we're talking about disease transmission. It's important to know where these life cycles take place because they can occur on multiple hosts. So it'll drop off from one and then go to another in order to grow. The first tick we're going to look at is the American dog tick. It's in the family Dermacentor, genus Variabilis. Variabilis. All right, so this is your American dog tick. They are going to be a vector for Rocky Mountain spotted fever. So we can see sexual dimorphism between our male and our female. So here is our larva, the nymph, and then the adult. Again, they really don't have a larva. They go straight into their nymph. So they don't have that separation. It's egg, nymph, and then an adult. Next we have is our black-legged deer tick. This is from the family Aedes, from the genus Scapularis. So these are a vector for Lyme disease. And then we have our female and then our male. So you can see that kind of top shell is much different between the two sexes. Next we have our brown dog tick. This is the family Rhipicephalus, the genus Sanguineus, or Sanguineus. These are a very big concern because they do carry many diseases. So vector for Babesia canis, Ehrlichia canis, Rickettsia conallii, a Rickettsia massilia species, Rickettsia, and Rickettsia rhipicephali. Crimean Congo hemorrhagic fever virus, and the Tagoto virus. So definitely a carrier of a lot of different diseases, so you want to be careful of those. Next, we have our lone star tick. They're in the family Ablimoma, the genus Americanum. And so it almost looks as though there's a star on the back of their exoskeleton. They're a vector for tularemia and may cause tick paralysis. So when we were talking about an animal susceptible to tick paralysis, this is one of those ticks that may cause that. Now, before we get into mosquitoes, one thing to note about ticks is that when you are in the veterinary clinic, we are going to be saving our ticks. We do record and report those so that way we know what ticks are traveling where, so we can assist in disease mitigation and tracking, especially with different dogs being brought up from the southern states for adoptions. We're seeing far more different diseases for a longer period of time up north than we would normally, and part of that we can link to the transfer of those dogs for adoption. So again, whenever you're pulling a tick off, you are going to pull it at the base of where that head is. You are not going to burn a tick. You want to make sure that you are getting the full tick. As long as you have your animal on flea and tick prevention, you want to have it on year-round, then you're going to be all right. The tick will not be able to get a viable meal, and then what it is able to consume will cause it to fall off its host. So that's one reason that tick preventative is so important. Next, we're going to talk about mosquitoes. So mosquitoes have a full life cycle or a complete metamorphosis. They're going to go from their egg to larva to the pupa to the adult. Now, the cool thing is that the larval and pupal stage actually occurs in the water. So that's why when it's rainy and there's a lot of standing water, that's when we're going to see an increase in those mosquito populations. Another interesting thing to note is that The females are actually the ones that are the parasites. The females need a blood meal so they can support the development of the eggs. The males actually feed on nectar. So male mosquitoes are not harmful or dangerous to us. It's the females that rely on that high protein meal of our blood to be able to support the next generation of mosquitoes. So the first mosquito we're going to look at is from the genus Anopheles. So they're intermediate host for malaria. All right, so they are going to be a host for malaria. We can see this dark dorsal side and then a nice light ventral side of the abdomen. So again, that was from the genus Anopheles. This is the larva. Okay, so the Anophelus larva, we have the little legs right there, and then it's going to be swimming in the water, our little furs to help it support while it's swimming. All right, next is going to be the genus Culix or Solix. This is the vector for Western equine encephalitis. Western equine encephalitis is definitely a dangerous disease, and it's affecting our equine friends. So here we have a pale mosquito, and then instead of a dorsal ventral difference, we have rings going around the abdomen. So there is a difference when you look at mosquitoes on a microscopic level, which is kind of awesome because it's not something that we think about. Here is the larva for the Sulex. You can see this one's a little bit more purple or blue versus the yellow of the Anopheles. We also have all those furs all the way around down its larval body. Next, we have the Aedes mosquito. I think this mosquito is beautiful. It's black with white stripes even all along its legs at the joints. I think it's really pretty. So they're a vector though for yellow fever, dengue fever, and equine encephalitis. So definitely not a fun mosquito, but they are very pretty. So these are the Aedes mosquitoes. And there is the larva. So we have not so much of the fur all the way around its body, but we have a bit more of a detachment between the head and that thorax or that secondary segment of the body. We also have that little fin lip right over there. All right, and so that is all we're going to look at for our mosquitoes, our lice, and our ticks.